Hello and welcome to our Simple Online podcast, where we'll be diving into all things related to healthcare, wellness and everything in between. I am Rebecca Moore. I am Chief Operating Officer of Simple Online Pharmacy and I will be your host. Today we're going to be looking at a topic that has got huge traction and is making a lot of headlines in the health community and beyond. We're going to talk about GLP-1 medications. We'll be discussing their role in weight maintenance and the side effects you should be aware of, and some unexpected benefits on top of weight loss that these treatments offer. But before we get cracking on that, I'd like to introduce our guests for today. So Sarah Brocq, absolutely brilliant to have you here. Sarah is an advocate and leader in the field of obesity and has many accolades in that field. Sarah sits on the all-party parliamentary group for Strategic Council for Obesity and is a lay member of the NICE Weight Management Committee, and also founded and leads All About Obesity, an organisation which really tries to help represent people with obesity and to living with obesity and change opinions and attitudes towards those living with obesity. You are very busy in that field, also an obesity patient leader and advocate, and you have a huge depth of knowledge and personal understanding of the challenges that come with living with obesity and weight management. So welcome,
thank
Sarah.
You. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to sharing some of my insights today with you. So
yes. Can't wait to hear about them. And I'm also delighted to welcome Aamina Rafiq. Aamina is our responsible pharmacist and one of our lead pharmacists at Simple Online Pharmacy. She brings a huge understanding of the clinical side of weight management, having supported many thousands of patients on their journey, and especially has depth in the pharmacological effects and aspects of it. And you've been instrumental in guiding our patients through their treatment journeys, helping bring a huge amount of success in weight loss and weight management through GLP-1s. So welcome, Aamina.
Thank you for having me today.
So today's episode, we want to actually go a little bit beyond what might be out there in terms of the basic information that people will have read about GLP-1s online, and talk about the science of obesity and what we are now learning about these incredible GLP-1 medications. And the science of obesity is something that the scientific community, I think, still will admit they haven't fully bottomed out and understood completely. And speaking to some very knowledgeable people in this field, what I've been picking up from those people is that we know that there is a balance of chemicals in the brain that help govern your want and need to eat. So you've got your homeostatic regulation, which is where your ghrelin, your hunger hormones, and your GLP-1, which is your satiety hormone, play a role. And that's all about I need to eat to survive. These are chemical triggers in your brain telling you need to eat to survive. We know also that we have eating for pleasure, hedonic signals in the brain around I get dopamine and other chemical positive hits when I eat food I like and food I crave. And then there's your executive function, which actually then makes the decision around you eating and not eating. And what I find really fascinating, having started to learn into this a lot more, and I'm not a clinical person at all, but what I think is really not known widely out there is that these chemicals are going on in people's brains, and actually for people living with obesity, potentially, those chemicals are much more potently having an effect than people that aren't. We hear this term food noise a lot, and we hear from our patients that being on GLP-1 really suppresses that food noise, that constant noise about food. I'd be really interested, Sarah, to hear from you. do you relate to that term, food noise? Is it meaningful to you? And could you help us understand it from a patient perspective?
Absolutely. Like this for me is probably the biggest thing. So having been on a GLP-1 now for about a year, it's kind of really, that was the first thing I noticed. I didn't used to think I thought about food that much. Like it wasn't something I kind of was conscious of. But the minute it kind of went away, I suddenly was like, I used to wake up in the morning, I'd be like, what am I having for breakfast? What am I having for lunch? What am I having for my dinner? Yeah, like I'd be processing that through the day. It would be part of my thinking. And then when I started taking the GLP-1s, it was like, I suddenly was like, have I eaten today? Like I literally had to ask myself that. I'd have to question like, have I not? Like, and it would be a real, like, I'd really have to dig into like thinking, have I? And that was crazy because I was so used to kind of be planning my meals rather than, And so, that food noise just allows your brain to have more space to do other things. Like that's what's kind of really kind of blew me away, was that I just wasn't thinking about that. And so it was kind of like a bit of freedom. Like it was quite nice to not have that really. But I also think, I suppose this is the converse in the, when I then was eating, I was trying to consciously make sure I'm eating nutritiously dense foods and I'm not just eating, because I did catch myself the odd time kind of just having a piece of toast because I wasn't that hungry for dinner or something. And then I'm like, Sarah, like, what are you getting from that nutritionally? Not a lot. So actually, let's think about what you're eating now. Let's be conscious about what you're eating, because I don't want to end up with like being malnourished or kind of not getting the right, fuel into my body. So I think it's kind of, you need to be mindful of the fact if you're not eating as much and you're not thinking about food, that we start kind of thinking of the right foods. And I think that's where kind of having the dietitian support and things like that's really helpful. But yeah, definitely food noise is the thing for me that I just couldn't believe how much that changed. And then kind of, we'll come on to this a bit more, but kind of having to stop the medications for a short while, it came back quite quickly. Which was interesting. Yep. And so I'm kind of, it's definitely, obviously the medication has played a part in doing its job here, and and it has returned kind of more latterly, which is a bit concerning.
Yeah, and we do hear this from patients that it's actually, as you say, not a conscious thing that they were aware of until they go on the medication. Yeah. Another example I was given by a patient very recently was she didn't realise she did this, but before going out to a restaurant, she'd be studying the menu in advance, and she'd be thinking a lot about, maybe I'll have, maybe I'm going to have this today. And that obsession and planning in advance of what she wants to eat. I also spoke to another patient who, very similar to you, Sarah, she's her biggest fear about coming off the medication is not actually the weight gain, it's the return of the food noise. And she's like, I do not want to give it the headspace. Yeah. And again, I don't think even realised she was giving it headspace.
And I think that's the hard bit, is that when people think about obesity and the medications, they think it's like a quick fix. It's an easy thing. Oh, if you do a bit of behaviour change, you can change your thinking around this. But the chemical things that are going on, that's the physiological stuff that's going on, isn't something that you can just behavioural change your way out of. Like, it fundamentally is something that's going on in your body. So yeah, behavioural change is great. We need to do that as well as, but I do fundamentally think we'll never take away that physiological drive that's going on there. Yep. And that is concerning, because it's kind of like, great, well, what does that mean for the future of people? But I just think we need to acknowledge that it's not as simple as just suddenly going, oh, I'll think differently, because it's not that simple. Because I know someone described to me, they were like, I heard them talking about the new medications, and they said something like, oh, it's just willpower in a bottle, isn't it? And I was like, oh my God, like, no, like, it's so much more than that. But that's how people are thinking of this. And I think that's what we need to change, is that just thinking around what this is actually doing and why it's so important. It's not just helping someone just suddenly have a bit of willpower. Like, it's changing the physiological dynamics of what's going on in someone's body to enable them to then, make different food choices, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not as simple as just willpower in a bottle. And I just thought that was a really interesting way of describing it.
Yeah. And that's a narrative I think we really, society-wide, should be changing. Certainly, having spoken to many patients on the topic, they all feel passionately that it's there's something chemically going on there that's causing this constant chatter about food. Totally. And this is the life-changing effect that these medications have had for them.
I think it's like you guys are saying, it's increasing the awareness so that people have a better understanding of it's not just a quick fix. It's more of a change to give patients support to allow them to make lifelong changes. And there's so many more benefits, not just with the weight loss, but the health benefits that come from it. And a lot of patients that we speak to all have similar examples like yourself, Sarah, where they didn't realise the amount of food noise that they have, that they've been living with for years, and how this has completely changed for them. So I think it's changing the narrative and allowing patients and their families and other people that they maybe talk about, maybe they have a bit of a stigma around using weight loss medications, that actually some people do really need this. And the life-changing stories that we hear from some patients who have been through the journey of it is really incredible. And I feel like there was a patient who I had recently spoke to who was going through IVF, but for years couldn't become pregnant, and it was due to her not being able to lose weight, but she tried everything. She had tried doing increased movement, changing her diet, but it was just at a certain point in her life, and I think all females go through this, where your metabolism changes and you've obviously got all of these chemical imbalances that are in your body, that you just need some support because you're up against a brick wall and you've tried everything possible, but then you're just not able to have the weight loss that you maybe had years back when you did certain diets to kind of get back into a weight that you were before. So it's really interesting, because for certain people who we've spoken to, you can first-handedly hear the life-changing benefits of them then having this weight loss because of the support and the medication, then being able to go through certain treatments, and even being part of the list for being on something like for IVF. There's certain criteria for it, so it's really beneficial. And I think it's more just changing the stigmatism. And I think there's definitely a shift that I've noticed, where a lot of patients have said to me that their friends and family who are eligible for the treatment now have started. So it's nice to get to see that they're not going through journeys alone, that other people that they know are not stigmatising weight loss treatment. So I think we're seeing a change, but I think the understanding of it, there's still a lot more that can be done.
Yeah. And another really interesting thing I learned around the science that we're still discovering into, and I think this is gaining some traction in the medical community, but still not fully understood, is this concept of metabolic adaptation. And I know you've been party to a study that was done with contestants on the show,
The Biggest Loser.
The Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
I hate the name of that show, by the way.
I mean,
Absolutely
horrific.
hate the name of that show. And that shows you, you know, how much stigma still needs to be overcome. The fact that it was okay to have a TV show named that. But anyway, moving on from that. The study showed that people reacted differently having lost a lot of weight, and some regained all of their weight and some managed to keep their weight off. And they're still trying to understand some of the underlying causes behind that. But from my understanding, there's this concept of metabolic adaptation, that the minute you stop a diet, your body is going into that recovery mode, survival mode, and makes subtle changes to your metabolism to try and help you get back to that weight that your body perceived was the healthy weight.
Yeah. Or the safe weight.
The
or
safe
whatever.
weight, I don't know if you've got any experience of that, Sarah, that, you know...
Yeah, well, so this was the biggest light bulb moment for me and my journey when I was on my weight loss TV show. So I wasn't on Biggest Loser, but I was on another equally as awful titled program called Fat, The Fight of My Life. Lovely. Again, like, but I wouldn't have even, you know, I would really challenge that title now. But back then I kind of thought it was acceptable because I didn't understand obesity like I do now. But yeah, so I lost a significant amount of weight over a 9-month period of time. So I lost 8.5 stone. And it was after the program that I continued to train like really hard. I was doing triathlons, I was running 5 and 10Ks. I was like really kind of, you know, fit, the fittest I've ever been. But my weight started coming back on. And it wasn't because I was eating rubbish either. You know, I was training and eating well. And I was like, why is this my weight coming back on? I'm doing everything everyone is telling me I should do. I'm burning so many calories. You know, I'm not eating many. So why is this happening? And that's when I started exploring some of the science and kind of came across the Biggest Loser study, as I call it, by Dr. Kevin Hall, understanding that there's this mechanism in your body that's suddenly going, you've lost this weight and your body doesn't like it. It's like fight or flight in a way. And it's like trying to make you get that weight back on because it feels safe. And it was like the things that it makes you do, like craving certain foods, making you feel cold so that you eat to kind of get warm again. And, you know, the physiological stuff it does, like, just blew my mind. But it also made me go, so this isn't my fault. Like, there's things happening here that are out of my control that I need to kind of work out how I can manage this rather than fight against it. Because I think I'd spent my whole life fighting against my body because I didn't like what it was doing. Whereas now I kind of go, no, I need to work with my body. So let's see how I can manage my body differently and what do I need to do in order to kind of be the healthiest version of myself. So that information about the metabolic adaptation and understanding that these things are going to be happening, so how can we manage them, was really important for me to kind of be at peace with myself a little bit more and not give myself such a hard time, because I've spent most of my life like hating myself and blaming and shaming myself. And it was just kind of like, that needs to stop, and it needs to stop for everyone living in larger bodies or living with obesity. Like, it's not your fault. Like, and we need to start taking that away from people, because I think, you know, I was listening to a podcast, or I think it was a YouTube actually the other day, and it was like, again, it was like the two interviewers were talking about weight and obesity, and they were like, it's about personal responsibility. People just need to make some, you know, change. And I just sat there, I was like, this is still happening. These conversations are happening daily, and it's not about personal responsibility. Like, we have spent so long on every diet going, the amount of money I've spent personally trying to manage my weight is ridiculous. And it's like, you know, it's not about that. There's more to this, and we need to start accepting and being more empathetic to people, because it's not about just pointing a finger going, Sarah, do something differently. I'm trying. Like, there's more to this, and it's the science and the complexity that we need to understand more so that people can kind of have that empathy a bit more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as I've gone on this journey, I also have a BMI over 30. I unfortunately can't take weight care medication because of another medical condition that I have. So I'm one of those people that's having to try and find a way without the medication. And even just understanding the science of it has massively shifted my approach to it all. You know, I was speaking to a patient the other day who she is on the medication. She realised, as well as the food noise and the chemicals, she had problems with stress eating and boredom eating. And I don't think she would have understood that about herself if she hadn't started taking the medication, because she realised she had this pattern of, if she was stressed at work or if she was boring, she'd be ending up in front of the fridge with the fridge door open, but then looking at it going, oh, I'm not actually hungry. Why am I here? What am I doing this for? So I think these real light bulb moments are things you can take away, with or without the medication, if you really understand the science behind it. And then going back to this, the chemical interactions, and we know there's a lot of work going on in studies. And do you want a wee break? Okay, no. We know there's a lot of studies going on and theories around what this medication is actually doing, because I think the scientific community now are realising it's more than just acting on the gut, and it's acting on the brain, and it's doing more than just telling you feel full.
Yeah,
it's doing something else, and we don't know exactly what, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there that it's actually potentially going to support things like addiction. And I know there's trials going on for that. It's already been licensed. Well, certainly Wegovy's been licensed for cardiovascular disease and prevention of heart disease, which is an incredible scientific discovery. And what was interesting actually about that was when that news broke, and it was front page news across all the main titles, we saw an overnight shift in demographic, and we saw that the proportion of men wanting to start treatment doubled.
Wow.
Overnight, which is pretty incredible, isn't it? And it gives you an insight as well into the gender difference around weight management as well, and
but
the
also
perception.
the stigma, I think, as well around it. I think
Yeah.
what it's done to me is highlight the fact that people just thinking it was a weight loss medication were like, okay, fine. And so certain people were wanting it, etc. But the minute you're showing it's more than a weight loss medication and has all these additional benefits, etc., it's making people shift because they put more power on the fact that cardiovascular health is more important than you're just living with obesity. And it's really making me go, this is really showing how much bias and how much stigma there is going on. But I think, you know, if just going with my NHS, kind of working with the NHS and seeing how trying to get these medicines through the NHS is so difficult, I think the way it's going to become more, or it's going to happen easily, is by looking at it from a cardiovascular benefit, for instance, like seeing that and going, you know, that's where commissioners will go, actually, I'm seeing a benefit here because it's not just about weight loss, because that doesn't seem to have enough power. But actually, if it's now going to improve cardiovascular health, okay, we might commission it and we might kind of give people access to these medications. And as much as I kind of sit there with a little smile on my face going, okay, well, it's taking that because you don't give that enough gravity, it's kind of really making me see how much bias is there. Like, it really is. And it's interesting, I think, from a male perspective, males don't tend to, and, you know, I'm generalising here, but, you know, they wouldn't go to weight loss, like Slimming World or kind of those kind of classes, but they are worried about their health. So therefore, the minute it shifts to being a health benefit rather than just kind of losing weight, they're kind of more engaged in it. And I think it's interesting to see that. And it's great that we're seeing that. But it's kind of like, it's all the same in a way, though. It's like, but it's just how we badge it up. And I think how we frame this is really important, because we need to make sure we're getting access to everybody and everyone's kind of engaged in this in the right way to see the benefits of it, because these drugs are so beneficial for so many people.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. So we've done our own studies on understanding the health benefits of these medications, and I'd love to hear a bit more from you, Aamina, about the types of benefits that people talk about. But from a survey we did recently, we found, first of all, we wanted to understand how many patients had we helped lose a material amount of weight that actually would impact the burden on the NHS that living with obesity brings, and the increased comorbidities or other health conditions associated with it. And there is actually some really good information out there that we know that from studies of millions of patients, this is a London-based study, that someone who has a BMI of over 40 versus someone who has a BMI of under 30 costs around half the healthcare costs per year because of all of the health conditions that come with obesity. So I find it really surprising, you know, with the view on obesity, that it isn't taken really seriously. Yeah. We know from the Tony Blair Institute study into the cost of obesity, total cost to society, that you can take the healthcare cost of obesity and times it by 5 in terms of the total societal cost. It's 98 billion a year cost to society, which is several percentage points of our national GDP. It's 98 billion is more than the entire cost of running the NHS when you put it into perspective like that. And we know that we alone, our run rate at the moment is we are supporting patients to lose around 40 metric tonnes a month collectively. Wow. So our annual run rate is 480 tonnes of weight loss across the population. And if you put that into cost savings for the health service, we think that's roughly around £56 million in direct health costs through reduced care needed for people living with obesity and the cost avoidance because they're paying for their medication and treatment privately. If you then think about that from a multiplier perspective, cost to society, you're getting into the hundreds of millions savings. That's just from us and our patient base. And we are one of many providers that provide this medication. So the cost and saving to the state is easily going to be in the billions. And it's a compounding saving as more and more people start to benefit from this and maintain the weight loss. And we even have heard anecdotally that from the total statistics of who's on this medication and the benefits that it's having, there is if the growth continues and the demand for it continues, that we may see a reversal in the obesity percentage in the population by the end of next year.
Wow,
with the
that's
traction
really
that it's
incredible,
getting in the UK. So isn't that an amazing thing to achieve? Sorry, slightly off topic there, but it's
but I think it's really interesting.
fascinating topic. But coming back to those connected health conditions and benefits, Aamina, what do you see coming through from patients? What are the typical things that people see a benefit in from a medical health perspective?
I think the biggest thing that patients are noticing is obviously this carbon appetite, which is expected from the medication, which is why everybody is choosing to start a GLP-1, because they need something to give them a little bit of support, is essentially what we say, because that's one part of other changes that they would naturally be already making. Because once you have the decision made that you want to change your lifestyle and you want to have a better weight care journey, they're going to have already made certain changes in terms of thinking about their nutrition. They've made certain changes in terms of their movement, but they're just needing a bit more support. So that's why they would start something like a GLP-1, which is going to help with curbing appetite. For a lot of patients, they do find that at the beginning of starting treatment that it maybe doesn't have the effect. So we do speak to a lot of patients who are maybe switching as well between different GLP medications, and when you're switching over to a different one, they're not realising that they've gone maybe from like a higher strength of, say, Wegovy, to switching over to a starter dose after a 4-week washout period of no medication. So not experiencing the appetite suppression at the beginning of starting a new one makes them feel a little bit frustrated, because they feel that they're not getting the benefits of the drug. But the important part is for us to just advise them to just be patient and allow the medication to work in a safe way. So they need to titrate accordingly, so going up in increment doses rather than skipping doses, because sometimes patients are maybe reading things online. There's a lot of people giving incorrect advice about saying that it's safe to skip doses, but the manufacturers and our prescribing team don't agree with like skipping doses or doing half doses, so anything like that. There's no studies to suggest that it's safe. So we obviously, our number one priority is ensuring that our patients are safe. So that's number one. And then number two is making sure that they're getting the benefits as well from the medicine. So we interact with patients if we start to notice a plateau even with their BMI. So we'll engage with them at certain points to say, our prescribers have noticed when they're reviewing your history that you've maybe reached a plateau. How are you getting on with your treatment? Do you need any support in terms of our dietitian? So at different checkpoints, depending on the patient's user history or certain answers, if they change within their assessment form, we're able to engage with them and we're getting a lot of insightful information from them. So one of the things that we've actually seen coming out in some research, although it's anecdotal research, is the link with reduced cravings with smoking, which is quite interesting. And actually one of our pharmacists had said to me that that's something that she had heard from one of the patients. So there must be some links to it. There obviously needs to be a lot more research that's done into it, because again, these are just anecdotal. We don't know how that's working, but it's possibly linked to maybe some similarities with the carbon appetite, possibly, but again, there needs to be more studies in there. Another anecdotal study has been about decreasing your kidney disease risk, which I found quite interesting, because some patients aren't suitable for treatment, possibly because they have had kidney malfunctions in the past. So it's interesting to see that there's been some research showing that it's actually benefiting patients who even have kidney malfunction. So I think it's an amazing medication that's not only supporting patients who need help with weight management. It's great for patients who are obviously diabetic, patients who might have some other conditions, that there's some light that has been shed on it to show that there's some data. But again, we all have to take it right now with a pinch of salt, because we need to do more studies into this to see how exactly, and then if there are more benefits, then that's amazing, because then we're able to help more patients who can see really great results from it. So
in our own survey, where we went out to over 500 patients that had lost a meaningful amount of weight, so they significantly reduced their BMI through the help of GLP-1s, 97% of patients listed at least one health benefit that they'd found from it. 60% of our patients said that their mobility had increased. And when we think about cause and effect, the running narrative, the convention on weight loss is, well, eat less and move more. But if your mobility is affected, then actually the moving more part can be really difficult. So what this weight loss medication can do is help you get to a point where you can move more safely and start to, get the benefits of exercise.
I think we're forgetting that as well. Like, there's so many patients, because we service patients across the UK, there's no typical group of patients that are all the same. So like you're saying about mobility issues, we speak to countless patients who have lived with obesity or have other health conditions that causes immobility. So when it comes to things like even exercise, I had a patient, I actually spoke to her yesterday, and she was telling me about how she's done really well, and I could see the results that she's been getting from this medication. And she had said that the thing now that she's having to deal with is the excess weight that she has excess skin. So the sagging skin. And because she has mobility issues, she's finding that really challenging. So there's still a lot of things that and support that can be given to patients who are maybe in that demographic where, although their mobility is improving, but they still are struggling with certain things like that. But yeah, it's interesting to hear all of these different types of challenges that patients maybe still have, and the support that is probably out there for them to be able to gain, which is quite interesting. So
what we found really interesting in our survey of patients was that 1 in 5 had said they were taking less or no medication for other conditions, not directly as part of their GLP-1 treatment. And the types of treatments that came up quite commonly were things like pre-diabetes, cholesterol, hypertension, a long list actually of other conditions that people had noticed a benefit to the extent that they were just not taking the treatment. A lot of people also on antidepressants that came off them as well. I mean, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. If we can help people with some things that are having such a huge impact on their lives, what a wonderful thing to be able to do every day. So I mean, a fascinating range of topics that we've covered there, and it's been just great to hear about your experience, Sarah, and also what you're hearing from patients, Aamina. I think just coming back to the benefits, maybe just to close out, it'd be great to hear from you, Sarah. Are there any that come to mind from a patient perspective directly that you've experienced that you'd like to share?
It's an interesting one, because when I went on the GLP-1 medications initially, it wasn't necessarily just because I wanted to lose weight. I kind of wanted to see, what was all the kind of fuss about? Like, I wanted to understand it from being, a patient advocate, and from doing the work that I do. I wanted to kind of understand what this was actually going to do. So there was kind of like a few things for me. But what it has is just things like simple things like being able to put my socks on more easily and do my shoelaces up. Things that actually before I used to really be like, right, I need to find somewhere to put my leg up, or I need to, and like just going up and down stairs. Like, I used to be like, I'd get up in the morning and I'd be like, right, I'm going downstairs now. Have I got everything I need? Because I didn't want to have to keep going. But now I see myself running up and down the stairs all day long, like, because I just don't think about it anymore, because it's not as painful, because just losing the weight has just meant that it's improved my health in so many ways. In that respect, and also just being more active. Like, I just naturally want to be more active. Before it wasn't because I didn't want to, but it was always painful, and the thought of it was always like, oh God, like so it's just given me like that kind of freedom and kind of release a little bit from kind of where I was, and just allowing me to kind of just be more active and just function differently. So that's been great. And then other things like going on an aeroplane, like the seatbelt now fits. I don't have to ask for an extension, whereas I always used to get on the plane and the first thing I'd ask for, regardless, would be like, can I just have an extension? Because I just didn't want to go through that whole, will it fit, will it not? Like I just used to take that out of the equation. But it's just nice to actually feel like normal, and I hate that word, but it just... I feel like I'm fitting into society again, which again isn't something I'm very much like society should actually win. The norm that we fit around is not the norm. So we do need to diversify that. But it is just nice to not have to feel like I'm a bit like an alien in this world. You know, it just that. So that has been nice to just feel like I'm not having to overthink things quite the same, because before I'd be like looking at chairs going, will that fit me? Can I sit? Will it be comfortable? Like, you know, because this has got arms, whereas it's a nice big chair, but other, you know, sometimes you're squashed in and it hurts. And, you know, so all of these kind of things that used to be my brain would be processing. It's like, I don't need to anymore. And that's been nice. So so there's been lots of different things, I suppose, from a health perspective, but also then just from a mindset and a just living perspective.
And so you've been taking GLP-1s now for a while?
Yeah, around 12 months.
12 months. And are you able to share with us what that's meant in terms of BMI reduction or weight loss?
Yeah, I don't actually know BMI. I need to look at that BMI, what the actual reductions were. But no, so I've lost around 6 stone in that time.
That's amazing.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, so it's kind of been, and it's not until I look back at photos that I can see it, you know, it the same. It's kind of like, because you just adjust to yourself, don't you? Because you see yourself all the time. But yeah, I look back and I just think, gosh, like, so I've dropped about 5 or 6 dress sizes, you know, all of that's kind of been quite dramatic as well. So yeah, it's definitely
an excuse to go shopping.
My life. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Any excuse.
And you talked a little bit there about feeling like an alien in society. Have you noticed attitudes towards you shift since you've lost that weight? Have you noticed how people interact with you differently?
Yeah, I definitely have. You know, I think I'm not shy about talking about this, but you know, like in the dating world, for instance, because I'm single, so it's kind of like I've noticed that I definitely get more attention in that respect. You know, I'm no longer kind of deemed as being as abnormal as kind of people used to look at me before. It's like, you know, so that's been interesting, getting more attention in that respect. Not always a positive experience, but definitely seeing that. But also just people taking you more seriously. Like, I think, you know, when I talk about things and they'll be like, oh gosh, like you've lost 6 stone. And I'm like, yeah. You know, it's kind of like, they're like, oh gosh, you know, and you can see their brain kind of thinking, God, what did you look like before then? Kind of, you know, scenario. I can just see that there's been this shift in a positive way, and that people do definitely take me more seriously, I think. But I still live in a larger body. I'm still not a size 10. So I think there's also that kind of idea around, well, you know, you've still got quite a way to go. Like, you know, there's that aspect still. But I actually had an interview with someone recently, who I'm not going to name the name, but this person said to me, like, after I'd done this interview, they looked at me and just said, Sarah, you're kind of really abnormal, you know. And I was like, am I? Okay. And he went and he like said, I mean this in a positive way. He said, because you're like a thin person in a fat body, because you're clearly very intelligent.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just like, oh my goodness. So like, even considering I've lost 6 stone,
shocked.
I still had that comment. Yeah. And so I was a bit like, okay, I actually didn't know what to say to it, because I was so kind of taken aback by the fact they thought
what
that was...
What do you say to that? It's
I kind of just was like, right, okay. And because they then said, I mean it in a, you know, I'm meaning it as a compliment
of
kind
course,
of thing.
Yeah.
I was a bit like,
turn around.
Yeah.
Okay. But the fact you actually think that blows my mind.
It's fascinating that you've said that, and I'm so sorry that you know, someone has spoken to you like that. And it just, you always get these reminders of just how far we still have to go to educate. And it's not just educating people living with obesity. If anything, it's more focusing on the people that aren't and helping them understand it, because we get a lot of patient feedback about them keeping the injections a secret. And they don't want to tell people they're on the medication. I've heard people say they don't want to be lectured, people, because there's a lot of I guess sensationalism out there about it being unsafe, or counterfeits out there. People feeling like they're cheating, taking the medication. So I think these are real things that we need to dispel the myths on. And then the other side of it is that perception of people as they lose weight and how others treat them. We've actually got some fascinating data on that as well. So with that same survey, we asked our patients, did you notice a difference in how people were treating you or interacting with you? 54% said yes. And about half of those people said nice things. So it's, I get compliments on how I look. People tell me how fantastic I'm doing, how healthy I seem. So positive comments. And then the other half, it was weight stigma. It was, and some of the comments just blew my mind. People treat me like I'm more competent. They listen to me more in meetings.
Yeah.
I don't get blanked in the corridor now. I get invited to more social events. My mother treats me with more respect. That was that got me right here when I heard that one. One person even said they've been promoted since they lost weight. So I think the more that we can help people understand that you are a person, regardless of what body you're living in.
Yeah.
And for some people, there is something chemically going on there that is hard to manage. And these GLP-1s play a big role in helping understand that.
Yeah. And I always use, I think Adele is an amazing example of this, and I always use her because I just think it's very visual. But like Adele has always been an amazing singer. Like everyone will say, she's got an amazing voice. But when she lost weight, everyone suddenly was like, how amazing is Adele? And you're like, yes, she's always been amazing, but you now suddenly think she's even more amazing because she's in a smaller body. And I just think nothing's changed. She still sings the same. She just visually looks different. And I just think that really blows my mind that she suddenly became this extra person because she's lost weight. And I just think, no, like she's still Adele. And like you say, we're still just people, whether we're in a small body or a large body. And our intellect is the same, whether we're in a small body or a large body. It's not about that, but we seem to make these assumptions that you live in a larger body, so clearly you're not very clever because you've done, you've made these choices. And I just think that's what we need to change is some people are short and tall. That doesn't mean that they're less intelligent or not because one person's short and one person's not. These are things we can't control, and body weight is one of those things we cannot control because genetics plays such a huge part. We haven't dug into genetics today, but it is something that is hugely plays a part in this. And so I think it's like we do need to start realising that and talking about it more. So yeah. Today has been a great example of that.
Okay, well, it's been, as ever, a fascinating hour with you both. I always learn so much in these podcasts, and I always feel like I'm on a journey of discovery myself through them. So can't thank you both enough for sharing so openly and honestly your experiences. There's so many takeaways, but for me, the big ones are, first of all, just the role that everybody plays in supporting someone who's living with obesity and seeking help for it. That person needs love, kindness and support from themselves and from everybody helping them. And the other point that I'm taking away from this is there's a huge amount of science behind obesity that we are still learning into in the medical community, in the scientific community, and as always, society will lag behind in their understanding of that. And it's about get yourself educated, really understand what you're talking about before you take to the keyboard and comment on an article or a social media post. Open your mind and really take on board all of the studies and the information that are out there that might actually really make you think differently about what the World Health Organization has deemed to be a lifelong chronic condition. And the third thing I would always say is what's really important if you are considering GLP-1 medication is that you obtain it through a UK registered pharmacy from a licensed prescriber. That will mean that you get genuine medication and go with a prescriber that has a deep understanding of this medication and obesity as a condition and can give you the full support, guidance and advice to manage your weight through these medications. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of your insights.
Thank you.
It's been great as always. As I say, I think we all learn from each other, like different bits each time. So yeah, it's been great.
It's been really good. Thank you for having us.